It's in partnership with American Cinematographer at our next in a series of discussions on behind the lens. And we're going to talk to filmmakers about the art and craft of cinematography. And today's panel is about indie film, the aesthetics, methods, and challenges. I'm Andrew Fish, managing editor at American Cinematographer, and hope everybody's having a great show. And I hope seen some good movies, and I hope that everybody's been able to kind of meet and touch base and kind of talk shop with like-minded people, fellow filmmakers, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing here today as well. So we've got a trio of talented cinematographers, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and let us know what film you're here today to talk about. So let's start with Arlene.
Hello. I'm Arlene Muller, and my film is Stress Positions.
That's Eric Yu. I shot a film called I Saw the TV Glow.
I'm Kristen Correll. A lot of people call me K2, and I shot My Old Ass.
So let's start with Kristen. I know you've had a long creative partnership with director Megan Park, and tell me about how your work with her led you to this film, My Old Ass, and what it was like for you to kind of take this big step up in resources, because I know that that's yeah.
So Megan and I met very shortly after I graduated from AFI, and we met, and I was doing music videos with her. We started, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 music videos, and through that time became very close friends. And when she had written The Fallout, immediately sent me draft 1. You know, I had my notes, but and it was like kind of not a question whether or not we were going to work together, thank God. And it's just kind of one of those partnerships that's evolved over the years. And when My Old Ass came up, it was a little scary at first because it was going to be shot in Canada, which was like, uh-oh, am I allowed? But it happened, and I can't imagine not working with her. I mean, I guess I didn't blow it on the other one.
And can you talk a little bit about the step up in resources?
Yeah, so for The Fallout, that was $1 million. And then, you know, it was one of the first things kind of shot during COVID, which was really weird, and especially being that indie, and it was like, no one really knew what was going on. But then My Old Ass was finally like with Lucky Chap and Indian Paintbrush, and it was kind of like, oh, all right, we're making a real movie. And like, you know, what was it, like maybe 7 to 10 mil range? And like that step up, I think, allows you to kind of have the resources or the tools you need, as opposed to trying to figure it out on like a zero budget. Well, not zero. I know people have made for a lot less than $1 million. But I think it just kind of opens up the conversation to using the proper tools for what you need to do. And like for our work, we had a lot of water work and being on boats, and that is super difficult. And even like huge night exteriors where we're lighting up like a lake. And so on a $1 million budget, that would have been, I don't know how we would have done that. So I think the step up in budget kind of made that possible.
And Arlene, for stress positions, I know in terms of what the audience sees, it's just this wonderful chaos that we see on the screen. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how you go about putting something like that together, such a frantic pace and these close-ups and reaction shots and everything, but and the ambitious goals of your director Theta Hamill, and to do all that without putting limits on the director's vision.
Yeah, so technically speaking, for that film, in the prep, we did consider 16 millimeter zooms, but our budget was so tiny we had about $650,000 for production, which was like, it quickly became apparent that film I would have to give up my entire, and there's DPs who've done this, and I have so much respect for people who can like give up their rate to shoot on film. And I think I would do that on a smaller project like a music video. But for this film, it was going to be a month of prep and a month of shooting in New York. And the little money that I was getting for my rate, I just needed that to live. So the conversation turned to digital. We ended up testing a bunch of different cameras and lenses, and we settled on Alexa 35 which we, we're very grateful to get a package from Handheld Camera that fit the budget. And the Alexa 35 had just come out. It was 2022, the fall, and they didn't even have the batteries yet that we needed. So there was this thing in the first 2 days of like, are we going to be able to even do this? But then the batteries came in and everything was fine. But going back to the technical, like how did we shoot on such a fast-paced schedule? It was with the zooms. Like we shot on 2K using 16 millimeter zooms, and that gave us a lot of flexibility. And we used these like old Canon vintage zooms to have the color and the texture and of course using the Alexa 35 sensor to have it feel more filmy. And that's how we made our days, like, because I was on a handheld camera with a zoom. But it wasn't that chaotic. Like, a lot of the shots were planned to be longer, and I think the sort of chaotic, frenetic, safety feel was found a lot in the editing. So we did shoot longer takes. Like, it wasn't like I was, like, the whole time.
Well, that is, I mean, so can you talk a little bit more about the, I don't know, I've heard, like, vintage lenses being kind of described as like a fine wine. I think Ed Lockman has talked about that. Can you just talk about that a little bit, about your feelings about using like vintage glass?
Yeah, so it wasn't even a question, because Theta definitely talked about how she wanted like an honesty and a truth to the shots, but she didn't want it to feel overly digital. She didn't want it to be precious. And at the same time, she wanted to feel honest and real, but she also said she didn't want to sacrifice beauty. So I own the Canon zooms because I own a 16 millimeter package. So I was bringing on some of my own lenses, like the 7 to 63 millimeter Canon zoom. And Theta had actually, she's a gearhead. Like she bought an 11 to 165, and that became one of our most used lenses on the shoot. It's so versatile. I mean, imagine you have a 16 millimeter lens. So basically it's like 11 to 165 becomes 20 to almost, like 3 something, So it's like, that gave us so much during the shoot.
Okay. And then just a little more on sort of the idea of kind of not putting limits on your director, kind of no matter what they ask you to do.
Yeah, one big thing I learned on the production, not from the technical side, but now thinking about the diplomatical side of DPing, is how to say yes. Because I think on a low-budget production, a lot of times as director of photography, you have to face these situations where you might need to put limits, and there's a whole dance with a first-time director of, well, I really want you to be able to like express your vision. So I think that was one of the things that I really took away from this production, is saying more yes to things and then going with it, and taking that leap of faith rather than immediately saying like, oh no, that's impossible. And so I found myself fighting with myself over that a lot on this, and really that was a learning experience for me. That's one of the biggest like life lessons I took away from this, is being positive in the face of a new director and just not limiting them with like, that's technically impossible, rather than let's find a way to do this. Let's work together to find a way to do what you want to do.
And so Eric, I saw the TV Glow, which is it's quite a trippy experience. And I mean, the name of the film is really represented in what we see on the screen. I mean, we see like the TV glowing on people's faces. That's kind of a really big motif of the piece, and a lot of flickering lights on faces, and you've also got these really wide tracking shots. And tell me about your work with Jane Schoenbrunn to achieve this. And I mean, I know you had a lot of prep time with her. Is that right?
Yeah, Jane and I had about maybe a month of unofficial prep time, which was, like off the clock, where Jane and I had never worked together before, but we have a lot of mutual friends, some which are here in the audience. So we just spent a month getting to know each other, which I think was very special, like going to each other's houses or meeting and getting to know each other personally, which is sort of different than, I guess, a normal business relationship is or professional relationship, but it kind of helped with getting in each other's brains a little bit about what influences we had. And yeah, that's kind of like the first wave of the prep, I think, is like really just getting to know someone's, like where they come from, what's going on in their personal life, which I think is, I don't know, maybe it's a thing about boundaries, which are not good, but I think it's nice to at least have a friendship, find a way to become a friend with someone. And we really we hit it off very quickly. And then once we were in prep, like full prep, there's almost no time to have that like soft kind of romantic, like what could it be? It's like scout one day, and we were scouting in New Jersey, so I would have to drive from New York an hour, in 2 hours. Like this location's only available for 2 hours, like in this time frame. So it'd be in the middle of a Zoom call or something, and it's like, okay, I'll see you in an hour drive there, and like you just don't have time. So having that month beforehand where any free time that you had, you just talked about it and shot listed it, put up a dream list of shots, and watch movies together. And yeah, it was like, that was kind of the prep work for it, which was really special.
And then, when you look at a script like that, did you get a good feel of the kind of look that you were going to be going for? Or is that, I mean, that must have been quite a bit of discussion with Jane. I mean, this film has a very specific look to it.
Yeah, I'd credit Jane with having an extensive mood board and kind of influence Bible of sorts. It was like 100 pages of things because Jane had so much time to think about it, and worked with someone named Albert Burney, who actually is a filmmaker who had a film here last year, I believe. And they made these kind of rough sketches too. So that was like the first blueprint. And then I would come in with my own sort of images and see where they kind of overlap. And yeah, it was kind of outside of my comfort zone a little bit with the amount of color. And I think it's like a challenge with kind of acting in a way. You're kind of speaking in a dialect that might not be yours. And it's like kind of feels like acting in this way where it's a vernacular of 90s TV, right? It's like its own specific language. There's like a vernacular of, I don't know, an art movie. Or like, there's all these different languages that are at play. And so finding the balance of where you want to go towards was probably the biggest part of finding the visual language. The one thing I never mentioned, I texted Jane last night. I was like, we talked about Joel Schumacher, like Batman Forever, as like a funny, like I was like, they look so insane, those movies, but it's such a like, it's so expressive. And I think it's like maybe a different version of myself would be like, oh, it's so bad looking, but I think it's like actually really beautiful looking, the film, because they're unhinged in a way, and they're very they're very like expressive, and they don't try to be serious Batman. They're not Nolan Batman. They're not Burton Batman. They like are incredibly camp, which I think is in the spirit of TV Glow, because I think Jane and I talked about camp and theatricality and all these sort of things.
And you also had to create a 90s kids show somehow. And it looks like it. It looks like it was shot in the 90s. What did you do to accomplish that?
It's funny. The original idea was that the 90s show would not look any different than, so we shot all of that on 35 also. And then at the end, it's like, let's like transfer the 35 to VHS. So that was kind of the thing that we found afterwards that helped translate and tell the story and kind of make it more legible, this world, and we did it like VHS transfer, and sometimes it would lose too much information in the wide shot. So it's like, let's do one version where we transfer VHS. We'll do a HD cam version also, which is like a step up from VHS. And then we have like a plugin that's like more controlled, and then you can layer. Oh my God, my colorists and the VFX people, who shout out to them, dealing with the layers of like a wide shot where you're isolating a part, like let's see more detail there, and you'd like dial down the opacity of the VHS to blend it with the HD cam because we want to see a little bit more of the eye of this other thing. So that's kind of like interesting trivia.
Well, I'm actually really great. It's great to hear that Cinematographer was involved in all this, these elements of post-production, which I think is like super important for the cinematographer to be able to go from the beginning of prep and through production and then into post, which I think is important.
Yeah, it's kind of a privilege that I feel. That's why I feel very special, and especially tied to this project, where I felt like it was from the beginning to the end. I felt I wasn't hired, which a lot of times you get hired and then you start prep like a week later or something like that, and you don't get involved in the conversations. But I felt very like involved from the beginning and end, and yeah, it was great. And my usual colorist worked on it, and we just spent so much time like finding this weird thing that we're trying to get towards, which we also had the pre-LUTs made during camera prep too, which sort of dictated how we were shooting. So they'd print it to the dailies. So when we'd watch it, it'd be like, okay, like that's what we're getting. And then I had a Blackmagic camera that, I don't know, has like a LUT thing that I would previs the LUTs that were being printed for film. So I could at least imagine how it was being translated to with Canon lenses.
Oh, that's terrific, so Kristen, you this is a very just like a really beautiful movie in terms of just the visuals of it, and you have these wonderful very still compositions of the woods, the forest, the lake, and it's just really gorgeous. And then suddenly, like you said, you're gonna have to jump on a boat. I mean, they've got these scenes in these this little motorboat. And can you talk a little bit about the differences between shooting kind of still compositional shots versus changing gears to do something crazy like shooting on this boat, and what all was involved?
Yeah, well, I have Megan to thank for that script that just puts us on this boat all the time. But I think that where it's located is Muskoka, Canada, which is, kind of like their lake, high-end, beautiful area north of Toronto. And it takes place there, and we shot it there. And for us, I think it was very important to kind of have that location be a character in the movie, and it plays such an important part in our lead's life and her family and how she's growing up and everything. So it was really important to honor the setting, and that's where I think a lot of this kind of stillness, where you can just kind of soak in the imagery and the location and see the characters interacting in this environment, even when we're inside. Like, it was important for us to keep it naturalistic and not like go too crazy and bring all of the elements of the exterior in. Now, when it comes to the boat, it's not that we ever tried to get crazy with it. You're just on the water and things move. You have to be fluid, no pun. But like, because you're setting up a shot and you think you're ready, and an actor has a question, and all of a sudden 2 minutes have gone by and it's a 20-minute reset to get the boats back in position, just because you want a certain background. But then you adapt to that as well. With that, we mostly used this Stanley boat with a 23-foot Scorpio with a Libra head. And we did some things where we would rig the little boat to our boat, so it wasn't as like hectic, just being totally separated. But there were a lot of times where we had to be disconnected. and it wasn't meant to look more chaotic by any means. I hope it doesn't.
No,
Jesus.
it doesn't look chaotic. No, I mean, just
I know.
by crazy. I mean, just having to
Yeah.
jump from one kind of environment,
Oh,
one
yeah.
sort of shooting style to something that is much, much different.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of fun and hard and frustrating, and that's just part of it, you know? You just constantly adapt. The part that was hard, though, was the camera boat, and then we're on another boat, and then there's other people on another boat. So, and like, you just have like a train of boats. Let me say boat one more time. But like, but yeah, it was it was definitely a new experience.
And if there's like someone in this room who finds that they're going to need to shoot something on a small boat, could you think of something that was surprising for you that you'd give advice to look out for?
Oh boy. On a small boat, I don't know, do it handheld in the boat with them. Like, don't try to be separate, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, oh yeah, wear life jackets. It might be easier if you're in the boat with them, but then you don't have as much variation in shots. So it's kind of like, what kind of movie are you trying to make? Like, what do the shots want to be, and that'll dictate how you want to shoot it. And for us, this is how we wanted to shoot it.
And for the shots that were inside the house, were you doing natural light, or did you have a lot of stuff set up outside in terms of lighting?
We had both. The house is really, it looks great in the movie, and it was the pain in the ass. It was situated like on a drop-off cliff on one side and like a total rock mountain on the other side. So as far as being able to get units like far enough back to like have nice pushes through the window, it was kind of tricky. My gaffer Francis is here. He's laughing right now. So we had to do a lot of lighting from inside and not make it look cheap and corny and bad, and he's amazing. But we tried to use as much natural light. We're shooting also during the summer, and up there it gets dark at like what, 9? So we had a lot of great daylight. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't trying to be too heavy-handed or stylistic as far as what we were doing with the lighting. We're just, because I don't think that would have enhanced the story by any means. It's about like them and where they're living and this environment that they live in.
I mean, you're really kind of, in this particular project, you're kind of there to let the story tell itself.
Correct. And that can be hard sometimes because, you know, like I always think about, and maybe you guys can relate, or everyone in the room can relate, if you're shooting, for instance, in a house, in a bedroom for like days and days and days, you kind of get a little set fatigue. And you're like, oh my God, am I just shooting the same shot over and over again? Like, oh my God, this is gonna be so boring. But then you're like, and your natural instinct's like, well, let's just do something cool and funky, like, you know, like, and it's like, no, don't do that. Like, now you're gonna go too far off course. You have to remember, it's not all playing out as one. Well, maybe for Room, it would be or something. But like, as long as you're staying true to your vision and everything, like it won't be boring when everyone sees it. Like, I don't remember the question.
I think when you're talking about the bedroom stuff, in TV Glow there's a fish tank that plays very prominent, which is green. It's green, and I didn't realize in the moment when we're, seeing the fish tank for the first time, I was kind of like, let's just try out these different colors, and all of a sudden we have to shoot, and I was like, that looks great. And then I realized I locked myself into that color. That's the first time we're seeing the fish tank, so that means every single time has to be that color. So there's this thing of shooting in a bedroom or something like that, where if
I've done every angle, like what else could I possibly do? But like, it ends up being okay. Like, it does.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cabin fever happens.
But Eric, though, there is, I think, the challenge, because what we're talking about is a scene in I Saw the TV Glow where the two main characters are each sitting on either side of the frame, and between them is a very bright, sort of unnaturally almost neon green fish tank that's behind them in the background. But you also need to see and understand what the characters are feeling. So, I mean, what kind of subtle stuff did you do to make sure that we also are focusing on the characters as well. Because, I mean, the fish tank is really center stage, but we do need to know what's happening in the story and these characters.
Yeah, I think with the color, that's like a color thing where, I don't know, it's an expressionistic film. I mean, that's the right word. I think there's, I've said before, there's the Kieslowski blue is a early reference, and when we watch that, it's so unnatural, everything, where there's like, it's like blue, yeah, everything blue, like it's blue, blue, and it's kind of just this thing that I think relates to like a character's, internal world and what they're going through, and so there's like for TV Glow, it was this big thing where we didn't think about it. So this fish tank I realized was going to be the motivation for nighttime. So when all the lights are off, like what I'm going to light with. And I was like, well, there's a fish tank that's there. So let's rig this fish tank with like some tubes. And we're messing around with different colors. And we already had a palette from the camera test. We developed, this color, this color, this color. So green just became this like, I don't know, it became this emotional thing that worked. We all just looked at it and were like, yeah, that's it. Because it could be blue, like a teal, like a normal fish tank, but it felt a little bit more cold. It didn't feel like romantic. And that scene in particular, we always call it the sex scene. Like there's no sex in the movie, but it's this incredibly intimate scene where you almost see like Owen's like losing his virginity or something. That's kind of how we were approaching it. So it's shot in this very like sensual way. I forgot the reference that Jane sent me. It was a '90s film where maybe it was like The Craft or something like that, where it's like a sleepover party, and it was kind of like a sex scene, but not. But the green, yeah, it just kind of worked and felt romantic. And pink was a big color as well. That was the pink opaque color. So green is also complementary with pink, so it kind of makes sense that the two work together in harmony in some way.
And you're also talking about using a light a light in frame in the background to light your two characters in the foreground, which seems like, I mean, did you have anything supplementing that, like up above or something, or were you really just using the fish tank to light them from the back?
Well, there's a tube inside the fish tank that was ours, and then we, wrap the light around with another tube, and I've used these, they're like battery-powered tube lights that I put pool noodles over the lights, like, floaties, and that's kind of was how I lit a lot of the movie.
I find that interesting that that's how you refer to that scene. Just so for people who haven't seen the movie yet, they're having this conversation with two characters, and the girl character says, just to tell the guy, I like girls, and she asks him if he likes boys or girls, and he says, I like watching TV shows. So I think that that's a really interesting way to have a very intimate moment like that with two characters who are not going to have, that actual conversation. So it's just an interesting way to do that.
I mean, that's like kind of, that's the film deals with those themes, but it kind of alludes to other things, and I think we're trying to always find a way that isn't explicitly like a sex scene, but there's like, how do these two characters have intimacy in a way that is, not really physical? And I think Jane's previous film, World's Fair, sort of it drew upon this idea of how do you have intimacy with someone that you don't even know, and questioning what is intimacy and what is connection. In this film, we're drawing on those similar themes of connection. And so that scene in particular was like this for the characters. They're like, something has broken through. They like allow each other into each other's bodies in a way where I think you're talking about the scene where Maddie's like drawing on Owen's neck. Is that?
Oh, well, actually, that's a great one too. Yeah. Oh, right. There actually is that physical intimacy. The one physical intimacy scene in the film where she's. It's hard to explain, but for certain reasons, she is drawing a pink tattoo on the back.
Yeah, I mean, that, I guess that's what I was thinking about with that scene. How do you express that intimacy, and how do you shoot it?
Arlene, in terms of, because we're talking about interesting lighting and lighting techniques to get across certain emotions and things that are happening with the characters. You had that great scene in Stress Positions where, if I recall correctly, they're carrying the Leo character. Everybody's carrying the Leo character, and everything's crazy. He's just gotten very, very sick, but the whole thing is taking place again. A film is being projected against them. Is it their wedding photos or something? So like their wedding, they're no longer married, but their wedding photos are being projected on them as they go through this terrible, frantic experience. Can you talk a little bit about putting that together?
Yeah, we talked a lot with Data about obstacles and barriers in the film, and a lot of the film, because it is a satire about the difficulty of connection between these millennial characters. And so a lot of the stuff that we were exploring in lighting, and also we were shooting through, it's a COVID movie, so we're shooting through barriers. A lot of the time there's plastic barriers. Sometimes the characters are wearing masks, or they're taking their masks off, they're putting them on, they're getting sick of them, they're putting them back on. The masks can be ridiculous. Like at one point, John Early's character is like handing Theta, the director who's also acting in the film, a gas mask to put on because it's like early COVID. And the lighting as well was part of that. That in those scenes, we're trying to create layers. So there's a scene where there's a projector projecting images of a long ago wedding of two of the characters onto one of the characters as he's being carted away after he's overdosed on pills or something because he's a party animal. And it's just this chaotic scene that the chaos is underscored by the fact that there's a projected image over the characters as these things are happening. So that was something that we talked about with Data, and also shooting directly into lights, shooting directly into the projectors sometimes, having one of the main characters watch a scene on the projector, and he moves his head and the projector light just floods the camera. I think it creates tension, angst, anxiety, and I do think that's what Theta was going for with some of that. And we also had I had an amazing gaffer. He was the key grip on Good Time. His name's Sean Gradwell, and he was absolutely not afraid to use harder light. We were bouncing off the floor. We were shining lights sometimes directly with very little diffusion into the scenes, and that was one of the first times I worked with somebody who was so fearless about harder light, and it was great. It was amazing. I thought it was really cool.
So again, if anyone here finds themselves needing to shoot where a light is aiming directly into your camera lens, what do you have to warn people about, or what to go about doing in advance to get it right?
Shoot on film. Or, if you're not shooting film, vintage lenses on an Alexa sensor. I mean, I think it's like everybody's been saying, it depends on the project, it depends on the look that you want to achieve. For this project, we're shooting on Alexa 35, which helped us greatly controlling highlights, strong highlights. That's just something that camera sensor is known for. And so that helped us a lot in color managing the fact that we were shooting sometimes very bright sources, and we were a super low budget film, so we didn't always have time to perfectly finesse, the lighting. Sometimes it was just like, grab an Astera, grab a light mat, let's freaking go, And so obviously it helped to have Alexa 35 sensor.
And can you just tell everyone what the size of your crew was?
Oh, God. I had a first AC and a second AC. and we had a gaffer, key grip, and a swing. That was the entire crew.
I mean, the questions abound. I mean, what kind of, I mean, that seems quite a challenge. But did you find it when you knew what you were sort of walking into with the minimal crew that you had, with the ideas that the director had, who's also so, I mean, you had this minimal crew, you had a director, and the director's also starring in the movie. I mean, what do you think when you walk into a situation like that?
It felt normal because that is the world that I was coming from. I've been working in low-budget indie, and so I was uniquely prepared to shoot this movie with a very small crew because that's how I was normally working. And I mean, I think it would have been different if I was coming from like the commercial universe and maybe feeling uncomfortable, you know, having too little crew. But this of course, there were some days where we brought in a couple of extra hands for the G&E team when we had a couple night exteriors, small night exteriors in Brooklyn, outside our main location. But our director was very smart. I mean, she wrote the movie for a single location, and I think, and just in and around the location. We had a car scene, we had a couple night exteriors on the street, we had another apartment that we were shooting in, but for the most part, we were almost 20 days or 18 days in the same location. And, you know, like K2 was saying, like, you get fatigue, like, you're in the same room, like, for days. It definitely gets hard. But one thing that helped was Theta's willingness to experiment with different lens sizes. Like, she really liked, you know, let's put the camera really high, let's suddenly get low, let's go tight, let's only cover this with a really wide shot and then some close-ups, like, you know. And I think all of that for her was fun and exciting, and it goes back to the thing of me also being able to say yes to that. And now I think after having done that feature, I'm a lot more willing to experiment and to listen to a director when they say, like, okay, I want to cover it this way, or I want to shoot the scene this way, and I'm not going to be forcing coverage on them. It varies, obviously, on the situation. But, like, that was a great experience for me to be able to feel free like that.
So, K2. I want to talk a little bit about background and sort of early years, and I know that you have worked like a lot of different jobs, you know, on the crew, and I know that you have a mentor that has been very meaningful for you, and maybe you could talk a little bit about your, you know, the importance of, or for you, the you know, working on in these various positions, and the importance of having people there to like Oita to support you.
Yeah. So I guess once I got out of undergrad at Emerson, I started off as camera PA immediately and wanted to, like, always knowing I wanted to be a DP, but really wanting to kind of do every position, because my thought was that with knowing every position, you're better able to do the job. And that is true. I didn't do first AC, except for at AFI. But yeah, throughout those years, I was really fortunate enough to work as a film loader and a second and whatever on like very big movies with really top-notch crews and DPs, and I think that gave me a really solid foundation on maybe one right way of doing things, like maybe not so great on the indie front, and then I had a rude awakening when I went to AFI. Not in a bad way, but after AFI, through, you know, working with Hoyte even before as a loader, he took me on as basically his protege, and it's really important, and I've worked with him for many years now, operating and shooting his second units and splinter units and whatever, but I've seen the value in having a mentor like that and someone who is really trying to kind of better like my career, as far as like just trying to teach me his stuff, but not be heavy-handed on that. Still let me have my voice and everything, but you know, it's nice to be able to call someone and talk about things, and even just like advice on relationships within a crew or anything. And so I feel lucky for that.
Yeah, and we're talking about Hoyte van Hoytema, just so everyone, ASC member. And I think it looks like, do we have, maybe we should take it out to you folks here and see if anybody has any questions. Over here?
You guys play one of the most multifaceted roles on a set, it seems. What is your favorite part of the process?
So, okay, yeah, so your favorite part of the process, and so who would like to take this one on? Sure, Eric.
I think I tend, there's like a very literal answer, but I like to go like very here.
Go, say it, whatever you'd like.
I think it's just a moment when you roll something or you do a take and it's like you got it and everyone knows that you got it. That's like a moment. That's not answering your question. I'm sorry. But, sorry, that was totally not answering your question. I think during COVID, I realized that a lot of my, it's not social life, I definitely think that I have a social life outside of film set, but I think being in a creative field where it's not just one person, you're not a painter in a studio, and you have all these other people who are helping you get to something. I think that's probably the best part of it, is that you get to do it not in a vacuum. And what happens with your own crew and allowing you to do more and develop these relationships over time, I think is probably the best part for me. And Sachi here, who camera operated on TV Glow, was first day seeing for me for a long time, and we've done it for many, many years, and it's just kind of, developed a way of working together that I think is, I don't know, is very rewarding to just develop that over time and have that kind of relationship. It's probably the best part for me.
Arlene?
I agree. I think the best part is being on set for me. The best part is being on set and working with people that I love, being able to bring friends onto a project and collaborate with them, and the mind melding that happens. Because I'm actually not a very social being. I'm shy, I'm an introvert, but there's something that happens on set where you feel yourself connecting with people and you feel your brain melding into theirs. And it's not just with the director, it's like it happens with the crew, it happens with everybody, and that is an amazing feeling. So I would say there's a lot of poetry in that and a lot of human connection. And I think that is my favorite part. It's the community, and it's the poetry that comes from that community.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but yeah, I get so excited to go to set because I make such good friends. I just I work with my best friends. I make best friends. Me and the director, it might not be easy every second, but when you figure something out, and it gets really cool and fun, and it's kind of embarrassing, but it's my favorite place. I hate myself. Okay, yeah.
Back here.
Arlene, you said that you found the aesthetic kind of in the edit. I was wondering what the conversation was when it started, and what was that journey like as you came into the edit and found a new kind of things?
That's a really good question, because the Theta original references were not Safdie-esque. The movie, when you see it, it's frenetic. It's unhinged, it's chaotic, the cuts are fast and loose. Our original references were Kiarostami. They were these sort of long takes, art house films. And I think that once, and Theta's a first-time director, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But at the same time, I think she was really letting herself experiment and be like, I like this reference. But then she could turn around and be like, actually, I really like Cassavetes' movies. That was something that happened. Like in the prep, she kind of went from longer take, slower movies to things that were a little faster. And so by the time we started shooting, Cassavetes was actually a very big reference for us. And then in the edit, the editor that was brought on after she had been editing the movie for herself for a while was the editor on Good Time. So we actually had a couple people from Good Time on this production. So the little bit of Safdie started to get sprinkled in there, and I think a lot of that chaotic, which for me is like very fun when I watch it and I see what we were shooting on set transformed. So on set, it was kind of a mix of like longer takes, and then there was some fun, I got to kind of like be like, and do more like kind of, I would say kind of like cheeky, a little bit cheeky like shooting. So, yeah.
Yep, right here. Yeah, yes, absolutely.
For everybody, how often do what you see in your head translates to what you actually want to see on the screen? And if it doesn't, does it disappoint you, or do you find something new that you might not?
Every time. No, not every time.
Yeah, I would say the same. It never feels like you get it. It's like chasing this thing that's never gonna happen ever. There's other things that come up and you're like, wow, that's amazing. It's almost like, something just appears magically and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that we got that. But in what's in the head, I never feel like we ever get it in some way.
This is a holistic, like in my opinion, thing across the filmmaking process in general, right? You have maybe a kind of platonic ideal. You start the film with references. Everybody has references. Production design has reference, the DP, the director. And then a dialectic starts to happen because people bring in their own lived experience. Suddenly you're on a boat or you're in a basement and it doesn't look exactly like the references, or this is what the production could afford, or this is something that the director suddenly fell in love with. And then all of those things start a dialectic with your original platonic ideal, and that's when it becomes the movie.
Yeah, I think also, like, everything's a choice. Like, even if you have an idea in your head and you line up something and it's not what you envisioned, you're still making the choice to roll. And even, I think, like, I think constantly there's happy accidents, and the audience doesn't know it's a happy accident, but the choice initially turned into a happy accident, which then was a choice to use in the movie. So, like, it's just an evolving sort of medium, which I think is super cool, because when I'm sure that's like a Fincher thing. Maybe it's like he's getting exactly what he envisioned, but which is cool if you want to go about that way, but it's also kind of fun to see what happens, and like when everyone gets in the room, even with the actors, and like you're like, we got this blocking down, we know exactly what happens. The actors come in the room and you're like, oh God, that's not the blocking, but that's kind of better. Like it's just, you just kind of, you evolve with it.
Any other questions? Well, if not, we could talk a little bit about backgrounds, because I know we haven't talked with you, Arlene, yet. You're from Poland, right? And then, so how did you make your way to this very room, having shot this film?
Yeah, I was born in New York and grew up speaking some Polish. From my grandpa who raised me. But yeah, we were living in New York. And then when it came time to want to go to film school, I just didn't have money to like go to film school in the United States. And there was the opportunity to get a scholarship to film school in Poland, which I ended up getting. So I was sponsored by the Kościuszko Foundation in New York to go to the PWSF TVIT, which is the Polish National Film School of Łódź. And I've never met Hoyte, but I know he went there. So maybe someday I'll get to meet him. But yeah, it's an amazing school. Once I finished, I came to LA, started working as a camera assistant, got into the union that way, and then eventually went to AFI to do my master's, which was super scary because I was taking out loans for the first time in my life. But I was like convinced, I was like, AFI, this is the best school. This is the best place to get a master's. Even if I don't end up being an EP, I can teach with an MFA. But thankfully, like after school, I ended up shooting, and yeah, now I'm here.
Eric, there's something that we were talking about earlier, prior to this panel, and you were talking about this idea of like quote unquote below the line and above the line, and where the cinematographer sort of exists in that geometry. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's like these terminologies called above the line and below the line, which I don't know where they came from, but crew is usually below the line. It's like kind of a day rate sort of situation, and then above the line is more of like flat rate and percentages. It's like actors, directors, producers, writers, etc. And I remember on a movie I did, someone told me that like I was trying to have a conversation about what is below the line, what is below the line, and then my gaffer was like, "You are the line," and I think about that constantly because it's kind of profound to think about. What is a line anyway? But no, you're interfacing with, you're the point person between the director, the producer, and the crew. So you're having to be sort of positioned in this way. You fight for the needs of the crew, but you also want to be someone who says yes and to a project for all the creative needs. You want to be the director's right-hand person. And you also might have been hired by a producer too. So it's like to execute these things. So there's this kind of like weaving of like what the needs are in a lot of ways, because you aren't, the stakes are different for crew. They're working different hours than you're doing so much to protect the creative end of it. And a lot of people are, especially on the union, it's like unions are there to protect the crew and their labor on sets. So I mean, for me, it's like, and for everyone, most of the time you just want to make the best possible project, and it's navigating that balance between like what is reasonable within, how can you bring the morale of the crew in week 4 up where they don't want to do this anymore, or they're like, 10 degrees outside every day for a week with like really bad catering or something like that, and some people just, you know where people are in their lives, and you're having to sort of manage that team at the same time manage the needs of the director who is, and this is with any project, it's not just TV Glow, it's like your director has so much on their plate all the time. It's like, and a lot of times if it's first time, it's like you've never had this many emails, phone calls, Zooms, actor drops out. What are you going to do? We need to make a decision tomorrow. Is this the right actor? And they're dealing with that. And they have an idea where like they know that this thing isn't going to work because of this. And you're having to facilitate that as well. Like you want to be a solutions person to that. And that may be at odds with the work that you're doing with the crew. So you're having to navigate all these things constantly. So the line is, it's a very existential place to exist in.
Oh, question, yes.
Yeah. Where do all the storyboards come into play in your creative process? Do they enter in? How do you deal with them if you don't agree with what the director gives you, maybe enough?
I actually,
Okay, so the
Storyboards.
storyboard.
Storyboards.
Is the question generally about storyboards and how you work with them?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I actually have not had to work too much with storyboards, thank God. Not thank God, but some directors I think need it. And I think especially when you're dealing with really complicated sequences, they're very helpful. Like action sequences, quick cuts, all that kind of stuff. Like that is where I find them to be very helpful. But as far as kind of these narrative indie, I haven't really had to work with them too much. And the only thing about storyboards in not kind of a action sequence or something like that would be, I just sometimes hope that directors don't get too locked into them, because their mentality immediately is a little more not as flexible if they want exactly what the storyboard is. But once again, for certain things, I think they're incredibly useful, and previses and all of that kind of stuff is great, and you kind of need it.
Yeah, I would say Jane and I, the unique thing about it is we photo boarded every single shot of the movie, which was great to go. Every single location we did, I had Jane stand there. What do you think? I'd take a picture with the Canon 5D camera. And I have a website that I would make, and I'd put together the sequences of all the things that I think are the sequence of this shot. Like there's long dialogue scenes, and how to break up coverage is kind of, I think everyone was going to struggle with it. But the more you do dialogue work, what's the 180 line? When do you break that master shot, and then you could start it's really hard to imagine. So you're trying to articulate this in a way where like, someone's across the room, how do you cover that? They walk over here, then you reestablish. All those things I think are helpful for me personally, and also the director, to be like, this, you just point. It's easier for me to point and show set deck. We're not seeing that, all this stuff. And I also I have a little like gimbal that I use for Steadicam stuff to do it on the day, just to see how it's gonna work in a sequence. I'm a big sequence person too. So I'll drop it into a timeline and kind of edit and see how it's working, just to get ahead of it, because it's just time that you're losing. And so I like to get ahead of it. And then like storyboards, it could take so many different forms. I draw, so I'll draw storyboards when I can't photograph something as well. So I would say even on TV Glow, it's like the whole thing of like you want 10 shots, you only have time for 4. Whatever, what do you need? And then I have all the shots. I'll really quickly just draw it, and we'll look and be like, we actually don't need that shot. We have this covered. So I mean, that's, I guess, the privilege of having like an art background, is that just quickly just draw stuff.
So with Theta, we used Artemis, and we used camcorder. So we did previs a lot during prep. We had the luxury of having our location. We had our house. So we figured out what rooms she would want the scene in. We went in with Artemis. We looked at where is a cool spot to put, the wide shot, and then went from there. And then when she did rehearsals with the actors, she did, in general, I think that's very helpful, because I have mild to moderate pre-production anxiety, and that helps to quell a lot of it, because at least you're going in with a plan, even if, as Kate, you said, you're going to change it later. It's nice to have a structure. It's nice to have a base, a foundation. So I think I'm sort of in the middle, where I really do like to have at least, and with first-time, if you're working with first-time director or new director, it's so good for them to like take the Artemis, be like, this is like basically kind of what you're seeing, So yeah, super helpful.
Can I just say one thing? I took you pretty literally with storyboards. I have every movie I've done in Artemis on my phone. So yes, in that sense, I use Artemis for everything. And once again, no, man, it's all bad. My phone is so, but in that sense, totally storyboarded, but not on paper. I don't draw.
I think, thank you very much for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Canon for hosting, and please read and subscribe to American Cinematographer magazine.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Oh yeah. Thank you for thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.